Hello. Welcome to the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. This is episode 11. I am Julian, and I am your host. You know, have you ever watched a YouTube video or listened to a podcast where the content creator brought up about how they were having some technical difficulties and how figuring out said technical difficulties caused them quite a bit of stress? Most of you would probably, disregard it completely. At the most, maybe give a little mental sympathies, well, that sucks, before you go about listening to the rest of your program. But holy shit. Man, ladies and gentlemen, I just had my own bouts of technical difficulties before starting this today's episode, and I'm still phew, reeling is the right word. It's still ongoing. The problem has not been solved. I've somehow found a way to work around it temporarily, and I hope that it lasts for the duration of this show. Because if something goes wrong, remember that scene in The Walking Dead? Back when it was good, when Rick finds out that his wife died, and he had to tell Carl before he walked a few steps and just crashed on the floor and just started crying. That is what I'll do if something happens where I can't finish today's show. It's been stressful, to say the least. So I'm just gonna do the show, keep my butt cheeks clenched, hoping that nothing goes wrong, and just keep it moving. That's what we're gonna do. Before I go any further, though, I want to take a moment to congratulate the winner of last week's Sweepstakes winner. I gave a little question, and the first person to answer said question on the official communication hubs of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast, which is my Twitter and Instagram, would get $10 in PSN credit. And the winner of that sweepstakes was, where's your name at? Where is your name? There you are. Mr. K underscore Salar T. Congratulations to you, sir. You enjoy those $10. In fact, I recommend you take those $10 and head over to the PlayStation Store, where it blows my mind how nobody talks about how many good deals you'll find on the PlayStation Store. In fact, it rivals that of Steam sales quite a bit. I find myself in awe at some of these sales that they have on the PlayStation Store. In fact, catered specifically to you, Mr. K underscore Salar T. There's actually a sale going on called Games Under $10, where let me scroll through this and let me tell you what you can get with those $10 that you've just won. For those $10, my friend, you can get either Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, the Nathan Drake Collection, Uncharted, NASCAR Heat 4, because you love NASCAR. Don't lie to yourself. You love NASCAR games. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Far Cry Primal, Need for Speed, that reboot that came out a couple years ago, Far Cry 4, Far Cry 3, Tomb Raider, the Definitive Edition, a whole bunch. A whole slather of very cheap games that you can get for that money that you just won. Courtesy of your boy, Julian of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. We'll be doing these sweepstakes quite often. I like giving away money. I'm like Oprah. As a matter of fact, if you're driving listening to this podcast, why don't you go ahead and look under your seat and look what I have for you there. I've got nothing there for you. Don't do that. Please, for the love of God, do not check under your seat while you're driving. There is nothing there except empty water bottles and probably a couple dried boogers down there too. It's okay. We all do it. While it may not be under your seat, that does not mean that I do not have a plethora of $10 PSN codes. And all you have to do to win them is keep listening to the show. And very, very often I'll sprinkle about these little sweepstakes. I won't tell you when. Just keep your palms steady and stay tuned. Now, with all that good stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and start the show like we do every single week with the weekly releases. Very self-explanatory. The weekly releases is an overview of all the games coming out this week. And listen, so many games come out every single week. We don't get to all of them here because, let's be honest, most of it is shovelware. On the weekly releases, I only discuss the big games, the heavy hitters, the one that I plan on playing, and the ones that I might not be playing, but I still think are worth bringing up to the audience. And being that the DualShock Graveyard Podcast is about giving power to the audience, if I do miss out on a game coming out this week that a portion of you think is worth talking about, of course, I'll bring it up the week after, give it its own little segment. But with that being said, let's get into this week, the week of October 19th to October 23rd. Starting off with the 20th, we've got Amnesia Rebirth coming to the PS4 and the PC. Amnesia, of course, being the very popular horror franchise. I knew this game was coming, but I wasn't sure if this was a sequel or a reboot to the original Amnesia. Upon doing some research, it is actually a brand new game in the franchise. So there you go for those horror lovers out there. That is Amnesia Rebirth, out the 20th on PS4 and PC. Coming out on the 20th as well, something a little unorthodox here on the weekly releases. We're going to talk about some DLC. That's right. We're not just limited to games. If there is a DLC that's significant enough to be included onto the weekly releases, I'll bring it up here as well. And this is definitely the case. We've got Doom Eternal getting its first DLC, The Ancient Gods Part 1. Doom Eternal, of course, Game of the Year contender. Fantastic praise. I have yet to play it. That's also sitting in my backlog, but I've always appreciated the latest Doom games. It's just a very fun, very gory, heavy metal gore fest, which that type of game will always have a place in my heart. Once again, that's Doom Eternal, The Ancient Gods Part 1 DLC. Moving right along to some more DLC. Holy shit. This is quite unorthodox. We've got more DLC than we actually have games coming out this week. At least games worth noting. We've got Pokemon Sword and Shield, The Crown Tundra expansion. A neat little expansion for those of you playing Pokemon Sword and Shield on the Nintendo Switch. And lastly, only because it's a Transformers game, we've got Transformers Battlegrounds coming out on the 23rd as well. This is a game in the vein of, it's a tactical strategy game in the same vein as like XCOM and what else? There's XCOM. There's that Mario game that Ubisoft made for the Switch, that Mario and Rabbids game. It's that type of tactical game. So if that's your type of play style and you like the Transformers, well, Transformers Battlegrounds might be right up your alley. Might be worth checking out this week. Whatever happened to good Transformer games? I remember during the PS3 and 360 era, there were High Moon Studios, the developer who also made that Deadpool game. They also made a pair of really good Transformer games where it was like a full third-person shooter campaign, and I remember it so vividly because I remember the multiplayer actually being really fun as well. That was Transformers War for Cybertron and Transformers Fall of Cybertron. Those were a pair of very good Transformer games. And Transformers definitely deserves better. I don't know why they're not, making quality Transformers game anymore. But those two, at the very least, we can hope for a remaster of those two because those two Transformers games were quite excellent. And that will do it. Very short release week this week. Once again, if I did miss out on a game that you think is worth a spot on the weekly release that I missed, hit me up on my Twitter and my Instagram. That's at ambient_Jules, and I'll more than happily bring it up on the following episode. However, since I've started this show, I haven't had one person bring up a game that they felt deserved a spot that was left out. And I take that as we all being in agreement that most games these days are shovelware and only the good games are worth mentioning. That, of course, being a half-truth. Listen, I got to tell you, sometimes there are smaller titles that get wedged between these bigger titles that get missed out on, and I've missed almost missed rather, quite a few smaller games that were actually good. Next Machina was one. I almost missed out on Stardew Valley. So believe me when I say there are definitely smaller titles that might get missed out on because they're not, they may not get advertised as much, or you just don't hear that name put out that much that it's possible you might miss. So believe me, I'm depending on you guys to, if I do miss a game that you guys think is worth mentioning, absolutely send it my way. And if enough of you send a certain game, I'll happily put it on next week's episode and give it its own little shout out as well. But with the weekly releases out of the way, let's move on to what I've been playing and what I've been watching. And it does sadden me to say this, but this week there's gonna be not too much in the realm of horror this week. Not as much horror shenanigans, and the reason for that is quite simple. I was out of town this week for most of the week. I was planning on watching or rewatching rather The Haunting of Bly Manor, the Netflix horror series. And I remember watching it years ago when it came out, and I remember it being very good, but I watched it all in one sitting. And I've always been of the opinion that binge watching entire series or seasons, especially in one sitting, it's not that they make the shows forgettable. It's just that you consume them all in one sitting, and it's just an impact for that one moment. Which so what, right? But when you compare it to how we used to watch TV shows, how we used to watch one episode and then you'd have to wait for a week for the following episode to come. And what that did was it used to make it used to make you appreciate that 1 hour of that episode. It used to make you appreciate each episode individually as, they would roll out for that month and a half or however long it took to premiere a whole season. And for that month and a half, you're able to just appreciate every single episode and just take it in as a whole experience that lasted again for that whole month and a half. And contrast that to the 7 hours that it takes to binge a whole season. That's just in 7 hours, you're taking in an entire season full of scenes and plot lines that you might it'll entertain you, sure, but you might forget or not forget, but not appreciate how impactful some of these scenes were if you had just seen them on an individual basis rather than just absorb all of it at once. And for me, at least, that's an opinion I have, and that's definitely what happened with The Haunting of Hill House for me. I enjoyed it. It was a good season, but if you had to quiz me on what happened, man, it's been years. I don't remember a thing. And the reason I want to rewatch it again is obviously because, it is the season for horror shit. But also, another season of that series came out. The Haunting of Bly Manor came out very recently as well. So I'm kind of trying to backtrack and rewatch that season so I can watch this brand new season. But again, that that did not come about this week. I was out of town. But if there is one thing that I did squeeze in before I left town, I platinumed God of War 3 Remastered. A very random title for some of you, sure, but God of War 3 has significance in my life. 10 years ago when that game came out, my brother, he brought home a PlayStation 3 along with God of War 3 the day it came out, along with, what was it? Modern Warfare 2 and Fight Night. Fight Night Round 3, I think, was back when boxing was. Oh, this was back when boxing was still relevant, which, man, 10 years later, mixed martial arts has faded boxing into obscurity. What happened to boxing? Where is boxing? Is boxing, let me tell you what's happened to boxing. Boxing has been faded into such obscurity where there are obviously still, legit boxers out there. There's still money to be made. Boxing, I'm sure boxing is still very popular in some circles, but I remember the controversy where there was a pair of, number one contender fighters who, were two of the best at the time. And there was a controversy because there was, who are those two YouTubers that got in a boxing match? I think it was Logan Paul and some other YouTube. I don't know. I don't follow, big YouTuber drama like that. But those two boxers, instead of having their own main event, they had to be an undercard for that YouTube boxing match shenanigans, and people were pissed. People were saying like, "Oh, this is disrespectful to the sport. You got two of the best fighters, and they're just an undercard to some silly little YouTube celebrity fight." And unfortunately, yeah, that's as far as mainstream boxing can go at this point, man. Two of the best boxers in the world have to be undercards to Logan Paul and whoever that other person he fought. Again, I don't, really follow YouTubers like that. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, Fight Night Round 3, Modern Warfare 2, and God of War 3. That's what we're talking about. God of War 3. God of War 3 was the game that introduced next gen, or what we know as next gen now. And it's one of my all-time favorite games. And for 10 years, I've never really been big on trophy hunting, but I figured just for the significance that God of War 3 had in my life, I figured, yeah, screw it. The only other platinum trophy that I have is for Marvel Spider-Man. So, I just figured I'd take some time to finally platinum it, which I did. And it was a lot easier than I thought. In fact, I'm blown away looking at, trophy lists for certain games and how, especially single player games, and how you look at this list and you're like, whoa, this is actually pretty doable. I don't know. Like, I assume that most trophies are difficult, and I don't even bother because I just assume that, to get the platinum, you have to do some very unrealistic shenanigans. But no, just like in Spider-Man, you just look at this list and you go, wow, this whole list is very doable. I'm pretty sure if I took some time to, you know, grind out this game, I could pull out the platinum trophy or whatever the equivalent is over there on Xbox land. And that's what I did for God of War 3 remastered. I believe all I had to do was just collect some godly possessions, um, do some weapon upgrade all my weapons, collect all the orbs and all that good stuff, and perform a 1,000 hit combo, which was quite difficult, but I pulled it off, and it was quite rewarding, man. That chase for that platinum trophy was quite satisfying, and I think I might take some time and just look at other single player games that I have, and you might be listening to a future trophy hunter in the making for sure. That was a very, very fun experience for me. But aside from getting that platinum for God of War 3, there wasn't really much else I did as far as gaming or just watching anything horror related. I was out of town, unfortunately. Unfortunately for you, I actually I actually had quite the good time out there on my excursion this week. But unfortunately did leave me with not too much to talk about as far as what I played or watched this week. But in fact, I'm going to do something a little unconventional, and the little tiny horror shenanigans that I do have to talk about, I'm just going to get out of the way now. We could just devote the rest of the show on to today's topics in gaming. There's quite a bit to talk about as far as that. We've got Sony finally releasing the UI for PlayStation 5. We've got Destiny 2 finally releasing their details for their next gen patch. We've got Miles Morales being Game Informers, and we got a whole bunch of topics I'm going to get to. But before I do, last week we talked about the scariest horror scenes in movies that are not horror. Scary scenes in movies that aren't scary, all that good stuff. And we talked about the classics. You got that scene from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory where he takes those little bastards on a boat ride down that really, really creepy ass tunnel. Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the nightmare scene, Large Marge, and the scene that I feel is the most horrifying scene in a movie that is not a horror film. Boys in the Hood. That's right, Boys in the Hood. The scene where Ricky's poor mother had to walk into that living room and find her son's dead body, and just watching her react accordingly. Just one of the most heartbreaking, horrifying scenes that has ever been shot. No pun intended. There's a couple of smaller scenes that I didn't bring up that I feel is worth at least mentioning before we get into the topics. For one, there's that scene in Full Metal Jacket where all the troops are in boot camp and they all gang up on Pyle because he keeps fucking up and getting everybody in trouble to the point where the rest of the troops fill bars of soap in socks and proceed to beat the shit out of this poor guy. I believe they call those Puerto Rican Macarenas, the little bars of soap in the socks, using that as a weapon. Yeah. Big shout out to the score of that movie. in that scene in particular, there this really creepy, disturbing track plays, and I remember it sticking out to me because I'm watching Full Metal Jacket, which isn't a horror movie, but it was very creepy. And I remember just thinking to myself, "Wow, this is actually a really disturbing little track. What's this doing in this movie? This should be in a suspenseful fucking horror movie." But that scene in Full Metal Jacket stuck out to me, and also a fun one, Beavis and Butthead Do America. That scene where they're in the desert, they ate that peyote in the desert and they start hallucinating. As a child, watching them hallucinate into that I mean, I love it now. I love that scene. I would love to watch that scene on a giant screen one day. But as a child, watching them hallucinate into that very disturbing demonic music video stuck out to me. And the last thing that I want to give a quick shout out to as far as that is it's a video game, which by the way, we can get into video games and TV shows, but that would just be a whole nother topic. But I do want to give a quick shout out to the introduction movie for Super Street Fighter 2. The one where Ryu is just doing his stance and he's in the dark and his eyes are glowing. As a kid, that used to scare me. My brother, every time he'd fire up the Super Nintendo to play Super Street Fighter 2, I would have to leave the room because when that opening movie would play and you see the outline of Ryu, he's in the dark and his eyes are just lit up in a very creepy way. And just like the way he's moving around in a very in a weird creepy way definitely gave me the jitters as a kid, and just felt that it was worth pointing out. I was a little pussy as a kid, is what I'm trying to say, ladies. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. But before I depart from this topic, there is room for one major one that to this day still bothers me, and it's not a film, it's not a piece of media, it's this horrifying shenanigans right here. Oh yes, you know what time it is. The emergency alert system, baby. Oh my goodness, why does it have to be so goddamn horrifying? Ugh. This is the part oh yeah. Then comes this guy right here. Why does this guy have to sound like why couldn't the emergency alert system guy be some sweet woman? Like, you just got done making me shit myself with those horrifying ear-piercing sounds, which as a child used to terrify me. Those sounds would go off. I used to have to run and find where my mom was and just hold on to her legs. But those sounds weren't bad enough. It had to be some distorted AM radio ass gentleman telling us that, some child was kidnapped. Definitely still to this day, it bothers me every time it comes on. That's something that I will never get over. And I'm going to go ahead and answer a lot of my own questions because I did ask, why they have to be so creepy. There's a reason. It's actually by design. The people that made the emergency alert system, they wanted to activate those parts of the brain where that activates that fight or flight reaction that just that scares you, one, and then makes you alert to, receive emergency information, which, fair enough, okay. If you can relate to my fears of the emergency alert system and you find giving yourself the jitters a hobby that you like to do to yourself, I recommend going to YouTube and going down the rabbit hole, which is a bunch of fake emergency alert systems. There's a whole rabbit hole of these types of videos that just, fake scenarios like nuclear war warnings, zombie apocalypse. A lot of them are really well done and sound very, very realistic. So if that's something you want to creep yourself out with, definitely I recommend doing it. It's actually quite fun. It's something I do every once in a while. So big love and big shout outs to the emergency alert systems for ruining my innocence as a child. And that's all I've got this week for the horse shenanigans. Again, there wasn't going to be too much this week as I was, again, out of town. But let's dedicate the rest of today's episode to the latest and greatest happenings going on in the world of gaming. We're a little less than 4 weeks going into next gen, which, again, is bizarre to think about. We're very, very close. In fact, 4 weeks, I I said 4 weeks last week. It might even be 3 weeks now. I think that's how math works. But I was getting worried for a bit because looking over to the Xbox side, Microsoft has given the Xbox Series X to many people already. Like those systems are practically out, not for, public purchase, but they're just out. Many people, many influencers and YouTubers have their hands on the Xbox One the Xbox Series X, and they've been giving their impressions. They've been playing on this brand new system, which is great. However, PlayStation 5 is not. They've still been very secretive, and one of the things they've been most secretive about is something that many of us have been wanting to see, which is the UI. How it looks. What does it look like when it boots up? That homepage. That's a very crucial part to a console. I like to say that the UI is the game that we spend the most time on, which is, double meaning. It's not actually a game, but when it comes to, swapping out activities in a console, what do? You go to the UI. We spend so much time on the UI that we don't even think about, and it's very important to see what this brand spanking new UI is, and they haven't been they've been very tight lip on that aspect until now. This week, Sony came out with a 11-minute video breaking down the UI, and I must say, I liked it. I like the way everything looks. I'll have the video on my Twitter account if you want to see it yourself, but odds are you've probably already seen it. But what they did show off was actually really nice. They showed off what I wanted to see, which was obviously, of course, the UI. However, I'm a fan when a company not only shows me what I want to see, but can also show me something that I didn't know I needed. And that's exactly what was also shown here. The UI had this neat little feature that's definitely going to be adored by all the trophy hunters out there. It's basically if you're playing a game and there's something that you might have missed or an item that you're looking for, a, there's actually a part of the menu dedicated to helping you find these items. Like instead of watching a walkthrough or going on forums to find whatever it is you're looking for, there's actually a segment dedicated to all of that, which is pretty neat. The user interface itself was very clean, very fast, very snappy, which I like. You have to understand, I'm still over here gaming on my original 2013 PlayStation 4, and going through the UI today it's just very laggy, very slow sometimes. So seeing such a snappy user interface is very satisfying to me, and I cannot wait for. Another neat feature is the PlayStation Store is actually no longer going to be an app the way it is on the PS4. You'd have to, where you'd have to scroll all the way to the left and click on it to go onto the store. No, the store on the PS5 is actually going to be integrated right on the menu. So you just scroll over to it and just immediately start scrolling and start browsing through the store to find whatever it is you're looking for, which I think is pretty cool. In general, though, I'm very happy with what I saw, and I hope that there's more to show off as far as the UI. And I'm really hoping that just like how Microsoft did, Sony just gives away some PS5s to, the content creators so they can start making their own, comparison videos, their own backwards compatible videos to show how fast a lot of older games are loading. That's something I also want to see, people have questions, they want to know, are they going to be able to play their old games at higher frame rates, which is confirmed, sure, but they want that 60 frames, man. People want Uncharted 4 at 60 frames per second. They want Bloodborne at 60 frames per second, which, I do as well. So I applaud Microsoft for, doing what they're doing as far as, just giving the systems out to these content creators. And I hope Sony does the same. But I was very concerned with the lack of, user interface footage that they were showing, but they did, and I guess this 11-minute video, will hold me off for now, but a lot of us want to see more, and I hope more will be shown within the next coming weeks. Um at least leading up to the launch, which is very close, so hopefully within the next couple days or perhaps next week we'll see something new, but that remains to be seen. But moving on here to this next little bit. A Twitter like leads to The Last of Us Part 2 DLC speculation and rumors. So the director for The Last of Us Part 2, Neil Druckmann, he confirmed a while ago that there was no DLC planned for The Last of Us Part 2. Just as a rule of thumb, I never take game directors at their word. Just from what I've seen in my whole life of being drenched in this hobby, one thing that I know for sure is that game directors are lying whores, and I believe nothing that comes out of their mouths. But the reason there's so much speculation now is because an actor by the name of Derek Phillips recently tweeted out a photo of himself wearing a mocap suit, and that picture of him wearing a mocap suit was liked by none other than Neil Druckmann himself. Now, this actor, he was the actor that played Abby's dad in the game. So seeing him back in the mocap suit and that tweet being liked by Neil Druckmann got some people speculating that some DLC might be in the works, and it very well might be. I mean, here's the thing: when you think about the entire package of the original The Last of Us, you had the story mode, you had the DLC expansion Left Behind, and you had a multiplayer component, factions. The Last of Us Part 2, many years later, it only shipped with the story mode. Now, granted, it was a very fat, juicy story mode that spanned, more than 20 hours, but be that as it may, it still had zero multiplayer, which, again, is confirmed in the works. The multiplayer component is on its way in one form or another. That still hasn't been shown off yet, and no DLC as well. So in comparison, despite how fat The Last of Us Part 2's campaign was, it's still a very lacking package compared to the original. So it is possible that they might be working on some DLC, despite Neil Druckmann saying that there weren't. But again, you can't take these game directors at their word anymore. We've seen too much deceit coming from these directors to, just believe what they say. So I'm not ready to make a full-on prediction yet. So I've certainly got my eye on this, and we'll see. It doesn't take that much time to turn out a motion capture performance to an actual game. They actually had a video. I saw a video on YouTube that it's actually quite quickly. In fact, the graphics that are on top of the motion capture are already about 60 to 70% complete. They just basically just have to take the performance and just touch it up basically with, some, you know, obviously an overhauled visual look, but the process itself isn't too time consuming. So we could be seeing some DLC pretty soon. Obviously, by the time the PS5 comes out and details come out for The Last of Us Part 2's plans for next gen, which for one of Sony's biggest titles, that's another title that has been awfully quiet as far as its next gen plans. But whether or not a DLC is coming for The Last of Us Part 2 or not, I think it's also a fair question to think about what is next for Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog being obviously one of the most successful, celebrated, and best studios in all of gaming, considering that they no longer have the Uncharted series to worry about, and they just shipped The Last of Us Part 2. Aside from that said multiplayer component for the game and possible DLC, there's really not much to go on with as far as what's next. I mean, most would assume that they're working on a brand new IP, which is very exciting. I mean, just imagining Naughty Dog working on an IP from the ground up for the PlayStation 5, that's quite the exciting thought. It's also possible that they could be making another Jack and Daxter game. That's something that's been in the air for quite a while. That's a giant rumor, which I don't know. I mean, most people just want to see it for nostalgic sake, but I think Jack and Daxter is a series that can probably be left alone, and I think I'd much rather just see a brand new IP from them. I think that would be very exciting, and definitely something that I'm looking forward to as far as next gen goes, is to see what's next for Naughty Dog. Moving right along here, Spider-Man Miles Morales is Game Informer's Game of the Month for October. Now, what that means is Game Informer has been unleashing tons and tons of brand new gameplay footage, interviews, screenshots, etc., etc., for Spider-Man Miles Morales. So if you're somebody that's been waiting for all new details and footage for Spider-Man Miles Morales, Game Informer has you covered. And I must say, I am somebody who was looking forward to continuing the story of Spider-Man that started in the PS4 game, but not necessarily hyped only because I expected to just go back to a familiar gameplay loop. But I must say, what I've seen from these gameplay videos have reignited my hype for this new Spider-Man. They've done what they've needed to do, and what I feel like they've needed to do is they've needed to do enough to differentiate. Did I say that right? Differentiate? There we go. Miles Morales from Peter Parker and not make him feel identical gameplay wise. And these clips have done a good job at showing the difference at how Miles Morales plays than from how Peter Parker played back in the PS4 game. For example, when you have Miles swinging around the city, since he's a lot more amateur than Peter Parker, you can tell by how amateurish he swings around as compared to Peter. His move set is different. The inventory and weapons that Miles has is a lot more different than what Peter had. There's this move that Miles has called it's weird why they called it this, but he has this thing called the Venom Punch, which has nothing to do with Venom. It has nothing to do with the symbiote. It's actually an electric charge punch, which is like just a giant haymaker, which looks really cool in motion. Possibly the most exciting thing that to come out of this lineup of new gameplay videos for Spider-Man Miles Morales is you get to fight alongside a cat. Folks, you must understand, I have a very, very soft spot for cats. Every time I see a cat, like, I'm happy. And in this triumphant title, you can actually fight alongside a cat that has its own little spider mask. It's fucking adorable. If there's one thing that you need to see from this whole collection of new footage is that. That's something you need to seek out if you haven't seen it already. It's perfect. And once again, I must say, Insomniac, man, kudos to them. They have turned me around. I was somebody that was not as hyped as I should be for a brand spanking new Spider-Man game to just being hyped for this all over again. And all it took was a cat, of all things. So again, check out Game Informer's coverage for Spider-Man Miles Morales. They've got a whole bunch of new footage. They've got everything. So if you're someone that's been looking for any type of new information for this title, Game Informer has what you need. So go check them out. Cats. And to finish off today's episode, I wanted to talk about this fun little sweepstakes being held by none other than your favorite fast food joint, Burger King. You want a PS5? Of course you want a PS5. What if you can get one for $5? Well, the good folks over at Burger King, they're holding a little sweepstakes, and they're giving away PS5s. The way fast food joints always give away consoles by buying their food. Now, what I have in front of me here is the PlayStation blog post, which vaguely goes over what this sweepstakes entails. The Burger King website has all the specifics. If this is something that you want to commit your time to buying a whole bunch of food in the hopes of getting a free PlayStation 5, that's where you need to go. But as far as the general gist of this sweepstakes, let me go ahead and read what the PlayStation blog has to say. The launch of PlayStation 5 is just weeks away, and we're teaming up with our friends at Burger King on a new launch promotion. Starting today being the 15th, today is the 22nd, and this sweepstakes ends on November 22nd. So at the time I'm recording this, you have plenty of time. Starting today, Burger King guests who purchase the 2 for $5 deal in the US will have a chance at winning a PlayStation 5 console. Here's how it works. First, register on the Burger King app or BurgerKing.com to participate in the promotion. When you purchase a 2 for $5 deal or make a $5 plus purchase on the Burger King app, BurgerKing.com or in restaurant, you will earn 1 game token. If you purchase in restaurant, be sure to hold on to your receipt. You'll need the receipt info to enter. You can use that game token to play a digital scratch-off game in the Burger King app or BurgerKing.com for a chance to win PlayStation game codes or Burger King coupons. The promotion kicks off today, October 15th through November 22nd, and is expected to expand into select international territories in the weeks ahead. We'll keep you posted. And once again, for the full specific rundown of this sweepstakes, head on over to BurgerKing.com. They've got what you need there, but you get the general gist from there. Whatever happened to the remember the good old days of fast food sweepstakes where you'd buy like a cup and you'd have to peel off those stickers, and those stickers would tell you if you were a winner or not? What happened to that? Why couldn't it be that? It seems like this one is a lot more digital. There's a lot more steps you have to do, which, listen, that could bode well for you. I mean, it could funnel out the casuals out there who don't care about the sweepstakes, and might be a smaller pool of people competing for these grand prizes. So who knows? You might be lucky. So the promotion is going on right now. So you're not doing anything today. Why don't you head on over to your drive-thru and get yourself a 2 for $5. You might get yourself a PlayStation 5 in the process. All you cheapskates out there that don't want to pay $500 for a brand spanking new console, well, there you go. Burger King. I went to Carl's Jr. today. Had myself a double Western bacon cheeseburger. And can't help but to wish that this sweepstakes would have been a Carl's Jr. sweepstakes instead of a Burger King. But Burger King won the bidding war, so there you go. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm actually going to give myself a moment to unclench my butt cheeks, because this entire episode I've just been focused, but not entirely focused. I'm still very worried that these technical difficulties that I was going through earlier are just going to rear its ugly head again, and I do not want to give it the opportunity to do so. So I'm actually going to conclude today's episode and leave you guys there. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. Again, the DualShock Graveyard Podcast is a gaming podcast with a horror twist. It's not just my podcast, it's also your podcast. Add my Twitter, add my Instagram. I will be back next week for a brand new episode. Until next time, guys, take care. And remember, DualShock is a product of Sony.